Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scicomm Monday. I'm your host, Nicole Wood. If you're new to Scicomm Monday, we try to make it as engaging a format as possible. So please feel free to Skype in, or excuse me, Skype in, wow. Tweet in questions, to bring it in through the via chat module that we have here on Periscope. And just feel free to ask any questions at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of your questions as they come in. If we don't get to your questions during the broadcast, then definitely tweet us at our various handles, and we'll answer them either after the broadcast or while you're watching this on replay. So for various Twitter handles, definitely you can reach me at Wildlife BioGal, which is my personal handle, or at the broadcast handle, which is Scicomm Monday. And then you can reach today's guest, Jordan Rutter, at her handle at JE Rutter. And with that, I'd like to definitely introduce and thank Jordan for being on the broadcast today. It's definitely great to have you on here, Jordan. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I feel like this is overdue, so I'm very glad to be here.
Yes, for anyone out there who doesn't know, Jordan and I have known each other for a little while now, and she's one of the big biology scientist heroes of my niece and nephew. I swear my niece is basically a little miniature Jordan walking around with her bird book and everything, trying to discover all the birds out there. So this was a special request by them to make sure that we had Jordan on the broadcast. So it's great we can get you on.
Yes.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background so everyone kind of knows where you're coming from when it comes to your science communication and also your scientific research work?
Okay, so that's kind of a loaded
I
question
know it is, isn't it?
um, for a lot of different reasons. One is I have been a birder, someone that actively pursues searching and learning about birds ever since I can remember. So since I was a little kid, and I've actually had these kind of parallel paths my whole life, where I've been in the birding community. As the hobby aspect, but I also have pursued the ornithology aspect, which is the scientific study and more of the academic and research oriented perspective. And now I, in the past few years, have a third path of doing the Scicomm route as well. So I'm become this kind of Venn diagram of sorts, and also with all of the organizations that we'll probably talk about during this broadcast as well. I have a lot of Venn diagrams happening, a lot of hats that I wear. Um, but so, as I said, I started birding when I was super young, and I remember in grade school, someone said during a career fair that you should really do what you love and that you can turn anything that you love to do into your career. And I was like, well, I love birds. I want to learn about them. This is what I'm going to do. And so I started doing various things that helped me, again, birding wise and then ornithological wise. And so I, picked up tech jobs when I was a teenager. I went to Oberlin College for undergrad, and then I went to the University of Minnesota and got my master's degree. And so all of these things have really become the pattern and weave together to make who I am today. And so I really learned, though, that we can research till the end of time and still have questions. But right now, our world is hurting in more ways than one. And I do want to, just take a second to recognize Las Vegas. I know that right now we're trying to have a very happy conversation, but I do want to mention that and not disregard that. But our world is hurting environmentally as well. And so I realized, I don't know everything, but I do know a lot about birds. And one way to help people connect to the environment is through birds. So if I can help be a liaison of sorts and help people learn about them and learn why they're important, then hopefully I can do my part in everything. And so that's kind of where the Scicomm part became a larger part of what I do now. And I love talking about birds, and I really appreciate getting the chance to talk about them and have people listen. Um, but that's where I'm coming at it from. I think that a lot of scientists today are if they haven't already embraced social media, they're still learning it. And so I feel like we need to have people just be supportive. I am not here to convert you. I am not here to make you use it. If you want to, that's great. But if you can just be supportive of the people that already do use social media and want to use social media, then that's all I'm asking. And so for me personally, I do it with birds, but there are a whole list of other people that we could talk about that are specialized on fish, birds versus fishes, for those of you that know that, and every other taxa. So, yeah, I think we'll kind of tease that huge statement apart as we keep talking.
No, yeah, I mean, most definitely. Um, yeah, I mean, without social media, we never probably would have met. I mean, that's how we first got connected was just via, randomly finding each other on Twitter. Like, we just kept kind of crossing paths on Twitter. And next thing I know, you're down at my house making pie. And then we're like, hanging out together at conferences now. We're, co-chairing symposiums and other things. And so it really has helped, at least like our scientific and Scicomm relationship, be able to just blossom because of just initially taking those steps and being on social media. Have you found that you've had like other good experiences like that of where you've been able to like, things that would not have happened if you hadn't been on social media?
Yeah, so I actually was just writing about this for another project that I'm working on, and I think this story that I'm going to share now is kind of the best summary for that. So I was very privileged and honored to be a co-leader of the ABA, the American Birding Association's Camp Colorado this past summer, and there was a camper who I saw a lot of myself in them. And on like the second day of camp, they were really upset, and I was kind of freaking out as the counselor because that's not what you want, like mentally or physically. You want everyone to be okay. And I was asking them what was wrong, and they said, I have friends here. I found my community, and when I leave camp, I'm going to be all alone. That they don't have anyone that likes birds with them. And I was like, I got you. And so I put out the call on social media, Twitter specifically, and I said, birding and ornithology community, like, please help me. Just send messages. Um, and so I had already done this for research because I kind of wanted to look like I knew a lot and have, talking topics. Sorry if you can hear my dogs barking. Um, but
Hey,
I,
dogs like Scicomm too, so we're all good with
yes,
that. I'm sure
yes.
Mary and Pippin love going out when you guys with your birding and other things. So
Yes, and we will definitely be talking about them in a little bit, I'm sure
yes.
too. But anyway, so I wanted the bird and ornithology community to send in messages specifically and show that they were here for these campers. And so I saved them all up, and on the last night of camp, I shared them with the campers, and I said, these are people that I don't even know, and they want to send you, like you personally, a message. Not all young birders, just these campers. And they were flabbergasted. And I'll admit, I saved Ken Kaufman, who is on social media. I saved his message for last, but they just couldn't believe it. And the whole point was not, I did not do that so that I could be like, hey, look, I got you these messages, or, thank me for doing this for you. The point was to show that there is a community out there for all of us, and that we're not alone, and we have these things in common, and differences that are meant to be celebrated and help us come together, not divide us. And so I definitely find that personally. I mean, we just shared how you and I met, Nicole, and how we're friends, and I know that there are so many other people that we could list in that group, but to
Oh,
actually
easily for sure. Yeah.
but to actually show um, these young campers. And again, just because this is being broadcast, I want to say, like, I was not, I totally respect parents' decisions. I was not telling them just to get on social media. I don't want to, again, convert, but just to say, like, there are people out there, and that this can be a networking tool. This doesn't need to be the enemy. Um, and so that was just that's how I see social media. That's the pure beauty and goodness of where this all comes from. And then if you can have that added element of actual education or learning, then it's even better. And that then comes full circle for where I was trying to ask people to send in parts about their research that I could share with the campers originally. So that to me is just like amazing.
Yeah, no, like I agree because it's one of those things of where so many times, even though there's say a whole bunch of biologists, there's a whole bunch of ecologists, there's even a bunch of ornithologists out there. Sometimes where you're at, say at your particular university or somewhere else, you might be the only one, or maybe part of a very small lab, and so to be able to like create like that bigger network, you kind of need something like social media to be able to drive that because you might not maybe have an option to go to all the conferences you want to or even know where to go or who to talk to. But by having social media, you immediately have those people that you can relate to in ways that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Even just talking to fellow ecologists at your university, they might not be able to relate to the research that you're doing. But with social media, you could all of a sudden you've got 100, 200, 1,000 other people that can relate to your specific ecology project and be like, I get that. And I'm excited for you too, because I'm geeking out with it just like you are. So,
Yeah, and this is actually kind of a nice tie-in because I think that that could be said and specifically applied to what I did for my master's with the Great Lakes piping plovers. And so I worked with this small endangered shorebird that a lot of birders are very fond of. They are very supportive, but the people across the Great Lakes, the non-bird oriented folks, are not as supportive. And I actually found this out via human survey work that I did for my master's. And so I went my first field season, and people were not very responsive to me. And so I was out there alone and I was feeling discouraged and I was like, how do these people not know about this adorable shorebird? I
which
need
it
to
is very adorable, I will say. Yeah.
So I was like, I need to change this. So I turned to social media and I did it for myself, but I also did it for this bird because, as you know, Nicole, especially being in Michigan, there are so many tourists. And so I was thinking to myself, how am I going to reach all of these people, all of these transient temporal people, and get them behind this bird? And so I did the survey work, which I can talk about in a second, and the actual like research I did. But for the social media aspect, this was my way of getting people hooked on the beach in person, showing them the bird through the scope, showing your niece and nephew in person. Um,
Yeah,
but
which
then,
I do have to say, like, that was really cool, even for myself. Like, I loved it. And, we dragged my parents along too. Like, everyone was just absolutely amazed at it. So it wasn't just something for kids, like, the adults loved it too. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, when you see these little puffballs be balls on toothpicks, and when they hatch, they're 5 grams, which is 5 paper clips, and to think that they grow up and they weigh 50 grams, which is half a stick of butter, and they can migrate 1,000 miles, and I struggle getting myself to the gym, is pretty amazing. And so if I can get people hooked in person and then have them follow year round because I would give updates about my research or other news about the plovers. That's a way for them to stay connected. It's not just this one-time transaction. It's not just okay, it's done. I don't have to remember. Your actions have impacts, and so that's where I was coming at it from. And so I actually incorporated this then into my research because I would ask in the survey question, do you know what a piping plover is? And the majority of people don't. The majority of people that I surveyed did not know what a plover was. And I asked them, then how important is it to conserve beach wildlife? And I made it general because I wanted to, I didn't want to be so specific that I kept getting no's.
right.
um,
No, I mean, but
and
that is an important point. I mean, I'm an ecologist and I work with birds and I didn't even know what a piping plover was like off like the bat. Like remember
Yeah.
like vaguely kind of hearing the name, but like if I was to go out and to identify it in the field, I wouldn't have been able to if my bird book wasn't there with me. So,
Yeah.
uh,
So, and the thing is too, I mean, we can have, um, as a plover is an umbrella species. So that means that if you do conservation efforts around this one species, you help all of the species in the same habitat. And so that's great. It's great to have these iconic things, but you can't pick and choose. Like conservation is for all of wildlife. So I asked people how important is beach wildlife to you, and like I have to admit, I apologize. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it was like in the high 90s. Everyone was like, very important. Like, we need to do this. But then when I asked them, would you be willing to have certain restrictions put in place to help ensure that conservation, such as dog leash laws or restricted areas to protect the nest because the plovers nest on the sand itself? They don't make nests in trees or things like that. Um, all of a sudden, it was in the low 60s where people were like, it's okay. And and it just got me thinking that it's this quote not in my backyard mentality where people are all for it if it makes them look good because you want to be on board and conserve things, but they weren't happy to actually participate or do their part. And this is where I continue to get motivation for Scicomm, because the thing is, for this particular issue, there are such easy things that can be done to make such a huge impact, that the part of what people are lacking is that education component. They just aren't aware. And again, all of this is in my thesis, so if you have questions about it, ask me later. Um, but things like setting up a dog beach, an area of a park or a beach that's just for dogs, so that over time the birds and the dogs can learn what's different in terms of area and where there are safe spaces, is huge. And we're actually seeing that at Tawa State Park, which is on the east side of Michigan on Lake Huron, and that's been really successful, and could be a really great compromise. So,
so
oh
like
yeah,
with the dogs, when you have them just you're running around and everything, is it mostly
yeah,
that they're just disturbing, or are they actually eating the eggs and the chicks,
okay,
or is it a
so
combination both of that?
yes. Oh, okay. So you're showing pictures right now of my dogs, Mary and Pippin, who are barking on cue. Um, and
Did you train them for that?
please know to anyone that's watching this, these pictures were taken by me in a very controlled environment. No birds were harmed in the taking of these pictures. Um, but as you can see, they're they're curious. They're having fun. They're labs, so they're water dogs. Like this is where they love to be. But the thing is that they're not as conscientious about if they run over eggs. They're not conscientious about how their 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 excrement can actually be introducing novel diseases. So diseases that birds don't have immune systems in place for, which is actually a problem that was really fascinating for me to learn about, because you just never think about, we talk about vaccines or being immune to something, but to think of certain animals giving other diseases to them. Um, the other thing that happened actually this year in 2017 was at Sleeping Bear Dunes, I believe, a dog did actually take a breeding female plover. So it just ran it to exhaustion and then had it in its mouth. Um,
Wow,
but
that's kind of scary. I mean, when you think about it, like that's
yeah,
something as simple as like I know you've always been a huge advocate of making sure that dogs are on leashes when you're at the beach and stuff, and something as simple as that could possibly have prevented that.
yeah. So one thing that I haven't mentioned so far is that there's only 70. Well, this year there were 76. I have to apologize because I'm not on the project anymore, but I believe there were 76 pairs of plovers, like of Great Lakes plovers in the whole world. There's only 76 pairs. So, and we have a female um, or rather, it's a male biased population. So there are more males than females. And when you're trying to increase a population, as you can see in this chart that's being shown, you want more females because females lay eggs. And so to have a known breeding female taken is just a huge loss, because there just aren't that many of them.
Yeah, because
But
like
still,
you said, I mean, there's only being 75, maybe 76 now. I mean, what there is last year we calculated out like the entire like breeding population, like the weight, equals that of one of like my mute swans that I study that's in Vaso. So it's like here, an entire population of everything for this one species is like that's like just one bird. It equals only one bird. So
yeah,
it's like it's
yeah.
crazy.
So I think, the thing is, it's so easy to focus on the direct take, and direct take would be a dog killing a plover, and so the easy fix for that is keep your dogs on leashes, right? Just prevent that interaction happening. But then you have these indirect, um, impacts, rather, where, like I was saying, novel diseases coming in through their excrement. They could separate the chicks from the adults, simply because that's their defense mechanism. They just get too far separated, and then they crouch. They're camouflaged to match the sand, so they could just never get back together. Um, there's a whole long list of things. And the thing is, ultimately, I hope what people take away from this broadcast is that kind of my new shtick, for this issue and research wise, is that we need to be responsible pet owners. A lot of people are familiar with the outdoor cat issue, and there's even a book called Cat Wars, and it's kind of putting cat owners against bird people, but no one's focusing on the dog aspect. And I don't want to start dog wars. That is not, I'm not ready for that at all, personally or professionally. But my thing is, we just need to be responsible pet owners, because ultimately we all need to be about conservation and come together for wildlife. Birds, again, are my thing. They're just such an iconic species, for wildlife. And so that's great to focus on them, but it can be about, being keeping your dogs on leash is really good for other animals too. So it's it's just we need to be more aware and realize again that our actions have consequences.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely one of those things. It's very easy to not think of all the different ways that such a simple action can have like these huge impacts, especially when you're dealing with a species that's endangered or threatened or anywhere along that spectrum of where they need that additional help. Like you said, like that one female being taken, that's a huge impact to that population. So where say like my mute swans, if one of the females were taken, it's really not that big of a thing because at one point in time there was over 15,000 mute
Yeah.
swans in Michigan alone. So I mean, it's wouldn't be that big of a deal to that particular population. But when you're talking only 75 individuals breeding, that's a huge impact. So you need like every little bit of effort from everyone around to help you out to like help that population bounce back up to where it should be.
Yeah. And so just to kind of keep making connections, we can study these birds for many, many years, and they have been studied for 30 years about their genetics or their reproductive strategies or things like that. And they're all very important. But right now, it's about what can people do to help that increase continue to happen. Because if people don't buy in, then it could be for naught. Um, not to be a broken record, but again, this dog that killed a plover this summer, if people would have known, could that have been prevented? Who knows? So,
Yeah, no, exactly.
but
So, like, I've thrown up the picture here of showing how you can tell which piping plovers are actually Great Lakes because there's other piping plovers around. They're not just the Great Lakes population. So, you have the orange band for the Great Lakes piping plovers. Do you know what other colors are used for the other ones around? So that way, people can kind of tell where their plovers are coming from that they happen to spot.
Yes. So first off, if you ever see a piping plover that is banded, there are people that want to know about it because this is currently our only way, really, of tracking where they migrate to or where they are in the world. Um, but right now, a huge concern right now is the Bahamas because pink flag. So I have the orange arrow pointing to the orange flag for Great Lakes, but birds that are banded in the Bahamas have a like bright pink flag. But there's also light green, there's white, there's yellow, and those are all separated in different regions of the Great Plains or the Atlantic populations. But pink for the Bahamas and orange for the Great Lakes are not only the fewest numbered individuals because they're just so small, um, but they're also just so important. And again, just to specify, the Bahamas are banded on the wintering grounds, so there are no breeding piping plovers in the Bahamas. But given the hurricanes this year, we know that the piping plovers use those as non-breeding habitats, and so it'll be really interesting to see what happens moving forward.
Will there be some of the piping plovers that were there already when the recent hurricanes started going through, or were they still all up in their breeding grounds, or are they currently migrating?
No, they are there. So females have been starting to, and I say starting because, or let me back up. It's not unusual for females to start migrating south near the end of July. So they could be there. But we don't have any way of actually figuring out where those individuals are until later, and we start seeing, who comes back to the breeding grounds, who aren't we seeing. That's kind of the beauty of banding, and especially for individual identification, like individual band combos, you can actually tell who is who and follow them. But I do know that some birds were seen in Florida after the hurricane, so that's very reassuring and hopeful. But we just won't know the actual impact of those hurricanes on the population until later.
Great. Yeah, I was just throwing up the map that you gave me of all the nesting sites here in the Great Lakes, and there are it's quite widespread within the Great Lakes itself there. And it's like how do you go and find these? Are you just dependent on people telling you that they found them, or is it just park rangers that are out there
Yeah, yeah.
looking
So
for them?
one
And
Yeah. So one thing that's super exciting for 2017 is that all five Great Lakes are now represented with breeding plovers. This year was the first year in decades that a pair nested on Lake Erie in Pennsylvania. So that's really, really cool just to see, again, in 30 years, this population bounce back. But we're so reliant on birders and people, you know, either emailing or contacting us on social media or whatever, because the area of the Great Lakes is huge. I mean, I think isn't the coastline of the Great Lakes longer than the U.S. Atlantic coast? Is
it
that
does
a
seem like it's something along those lines. I'm really a horrible Great Lakes scientist that I can't quite remember that, but I do remember something along those lines of where it's so
but it's
incredibly long that you don't think about it because it's sitting right in the middle of the U.S. and Canada right there.
yeah, yeah. So
Um,
it's massive, and so we just don't have the manpower. We have, if piping plovers are successful, they tend to have very high site fidelity, which means they tend to return to the same general area year after year. So we have key spots with hired field technicians or seasonal folks that will go and search for them. But for new areas, we're totally reliant on people, again, contacting the recovery effort, both the US and the Canadian side. We have so many partners for the recovery effort. And this is where citizen science gets a huge shout out because, you know, there are citizen science projects where they're more involved and they actually people can submit data, and that's amazing, and that's such a great way to learn more about science and get involved and go through the scientific process yourself. But even just submitting these records is a citizen science contribution that is invaluable because this is how the recovery effort has been able to sustain the population and even help it grow. So thank you to everyone that has done that.
No, I mean, yeah, it definitely. I mean, things like that can make a big difference, especially when you're a small team trying to go and covers such a large area, if you don't have the help of everyday citizens out there, it would just be an impossible task. There's no way, like, even if you were to walk those beaches every single day, you would not be able to cover that in
No.
time to be able to get the data that you need.
Yeah. So it's huge.
Do most people, when they're reporting it in, do they just send it to you via social media, say like by Facebook or Twitter, or do you actually have an app that people can report in that there's birds there and where they're at?
It's funny that you say about the app because I know the Atlantic population is working on an app for something involving plovers. I'm so Great Lakes specific that I don't know I can't give you any tidbits for that specifically. But so far they have primarily just used things like eBird, which many birders are very familiar with. So we have a person just dedicated to like gleaning records. We do have we have an email address. The social media only started with me, so I don't have the long-term use of that to say like
And what, you
over.
didn't create an app in your spare time with, everything that you're doing? Come on. You didn't take up computer programming and pop that one out too?
No, but it you know we got a lot of from personal experience. We got a lot of submissions, whether it was emails or whatever, where people thought that killdeer were piping plovers. So that also provided a really interesting um, opportunity for education as well, because as you, Nicole, might know, killdeer will nest in people's parking lots, like in the gravel
Mm-hmm.
along
Yep,
people's
I've
parking lots.
definitely seen that many times here in my hometown. So,
Yes. And so people would think, "Oh my God, I have a piping plover in my driveway." And we would have to go and be like, "No, this is, here are the ways that you can tell for the future." I think, it was a really interesting experience how some people all of a sudden, once they knew about piping plovers, wanted them. Like they really bought into like, I'm a Michigander and I want to be proud that Michigan has the largest proportion of Great Lakes piping plovers of the entire population. And then there were some people who were just like, well, can you get rid of it?
who
And it's like,
wants to
no,
get rid of something so cute and adorable? Come on.
but and it was really interesting too because to me it seemed as though killdeer and piping plovers are very different, and I think that helped me remember just the difference in perspective and meeting people where they're at because to me killdeer have two necklaces and piping plovers only have one, so that to me is like this really stark contrast, right? But
Yeah, that's how I've always been able to tell them apart. And of course, the killdeer, call is definitely very distinctive too, which helps you if you've, just heard that they're calling. So,
yeah, but going through that process again is just it's really good. I think it helps scientists if you can have an experience like that. It helps you be be humble in a way of like, okay, wow, how do I make my science understandable and relatable to other people? And that's what is the most important because that's what's going to stick with them, and that's how you then can move forward together and have this joint learning experience.
yeah,
So,
no, I definitely agree with that because a lot of times I always would run my science, or even not my science, but other people's science through my niece and nephew, who my nephew's about to turn 10 here in a couple weeks, and my niece is now 7. It's crazy how old they're getting now. But whatever they would spit back at me is usually how I would address it to the public, because I was like, if they can understand it, then in theory, just about everyone else out there can. And it really is like, if you can't get the public to understand it, then almost like, what's the point? They need to be able to understand it because they're going to be the ones helping to provide funds for us to keep doing the research. They're the ones going to be doing a lot of the real heavy lifting of making sure they keep their dogs on leashes. We can tell them all we want, but if we can't get them to understand it in a way that they're going to like actually do that, then it's not even worth it then almost. So,
no, absolutely. And the thing is too that because I've been doing this now for a little while, talking about Scicomm and social media is, when people are not as receptive to these methods of communication, a lot of times I hear it's not as formal or prestigious as, a published manuscript, or, it's just not how science is done or communicated. And the thing is, one, social media is not going away. So in my perspective, it should be used as a free tool that we can utilize and reach people. And two is, we're not dumbing things down. That is not, this is not what it's about. It's about, again, meeting people where they're at. It's about making sure that it's understandable and, getting rid of the ivory tower effect almost, in the sense of like jargon has a time and place, but sometimes you know, I don't even, I'm not a New York Times, crossword puzzle person. I don't need that vocabulary normally. And so that's okay, because there's, again, a time and a place, but sometimes it's nice to just be like, okay, here's what you need to know. Let me break it down for you. Let's get on the same page. And that's where I think Scicomm becomes this really valuable thing. So,
Yeah, no, I really like the fact that you're saying like you're not dumbing it down, because it's you just don't have that particular word bank of things, but you can understand those concepts. Like, I would say some of the insightful tidbits that my niece and nephew have sent back to me have been very, what I would kind of consider pretty high level, and they're young kids, and so it's just the way that they are phrasing things that makes it so much more understandable. Like, saying that our native trumpeter swan is the Michigan swan, and then the invasive mute swan is the bully swan, or since
yeah,
they're known for their aggression. And so it's just finding those ways that you can relate to people in different ways that they would understand. Because I know if something's just outside of my field of scope, like if someone was talking physics or other things, you're going to lose me very quickly. And even some ranges of ecology, if you're like just slightly outside my scope, I'm going to be like, say what? I don't know.
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, even bird people to bird people can be that way,
Hmm.
because, a person talking about conservation genetics, I might relate to you and I'd be like, that's super cool because it's a bird.
Right.
I need you to still help me out and meet me where I'm at, and I think it's so much more engaging and meaningful if you both come to the table instead of just this one way interaction. And I think, on social media, sometimes it can seem that way because of either the echo chamber effect, where it's like, of course, all the people that think like me are going to say the same thing, or I'm just putting it out there and who knows what's happening, which is one way. But then when you do get those two-way interactions and people ask questions or respond or whatever, then it's like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. This is kind of hitting the jackpot. And maybe it's not jackpot like some Scicommers that we could probably mention that have viral hashtags and things like that.
Don't know
But
anybody like that at all. Nope.
um, but the thing is, I think it's so hard as a Scicomer sometimes to think you're having an impact and feel like one person is enough. But sometimes just making that impact on one person is huge.
Oh yeah, I mean for
So
sure. So and the way that you can get the feedback from the people that you're talking through social media. I mean, a perfect example is one of the last comments we had on here was my dad, who apparently is watching the broadcast right now, was sending a message saying thank you for introducing him to plovers.
um,
And probably without you, he might not have never, would never have heard of them. And so it's just like he still remembers that from last year, getting to go hang up at the biological center, or campus there, and be able to like go see them. I mean, for you've taught him about something that he never would have probably have learned of otherwise, and
yeah.
so and now you're getting that feedback because of social media.
Yeah, and I think, for me, I love Twitter specifically because it's like a puzzle. How do you make the scientific fact into 140 characters with a hashtag, possibly with a link, and make sure that anyone can understand it? And that's where I said it before, but I'll say it again because it's my favorite thing. The fact that an adult plover is the same as half a stick of butter, like, people, I hope, I hope those watching, next time you hold half a stick of butter, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, this thing is going to migrate 1,000 miles, or just hold on to that more than if I, did the traditional 50 grams. And the thing is, like, I know that. I'm a scientist and I know 50 grams. So I have that education and background kind of supporting the validity of the science. But 50 grams is not going to get us anywhere,
No, I
but
mean, I'm a scientist and I still have like trouble picturing exactly like what 50 grams feels like in my
well,
hand. But as soon as you
that's
said the butter, it's like, oh yeah, I totally get that. And,
yeah. Well,
um,
but that's what I was going to say is it's also because we're Americans, so we got, you know, issues because we aren't Olympics.
that is true. It's yeah, we do have the additional thing of because we're always having to write things out in kilometers and everything else. Yeah, so Anna Bogenhold, who's a Great Lakes scientist that we know, like she's like, yeah, she's a scientist and she can't visualize 50 grams. So yeah, thanks for that comment, Anna. So it was just like, yeah, I mean it's a tough thing, to like visualize if you aren't using it all the time. Like so one of our Canadian pals, he's like metric for the win. Yeah, you of course Andrew would comment in on that. So, but it is. I mean, unless you're using something all the time, it's very hard to visualize it, and it makes it that much more difficult for people to be able to understand where you're coming from and be able to like picture those kind of things. So,
Yeah. So, and again, I personally, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that having this analogy is a problem because hopefully it'll be a hook. And if people want to learn and be like, well, how much is half a stick of butter? Then you can say, oh, it's 50 grams, instead of um, not giving them something that's relatable and something that will stick with them.
right.
So,
So speaking of things that are relatable and everything, since we did get you on here because my niece and nephew begged to have you come on. What are some ways that you can get kids that you found like worked for you, and other ways as you've gone through your career now to get kids excited about science, excited about birding and ornithology, to get them out there with their binoculars to be
yeah.
seeing what they can see out there and get them like all geeked out like you were as a kid. So.
Telling them that plovers are half a stick of butter.
um,
No, I think honestly, it's finding what makes you remember what is so cool about what you're fascinated by. So again, for me, it's birds. So telling them, this little tiny thing, can go thousands of miles. Telling them that red knots, which are another shorebird that is struggling right now population wise, in its lifetime can travel to the moon and back is amazing.
yeah,
Telling
that is pretty amazing.
cumulatively the miles that they fly over multiple migrations can equal the distance of flying to the moon and back is astounding. Um, and that's really cool because all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, what does it look like? Like, where does it live? Things like that. I I'll admit I wrote my college essay answering the question, why do woodpeckers not get headaches? And that's something that I, will share or ask people. And then all of a sudden you're posing this question that people aren't used to thinking about. It's probably something they've never thought about, especially non-bird people. And all of a sudden it's like, huh, yeah, why not? And then you can tell them about how, like, they have all of these different adaptations and make it relatable and talk to them about, you know, different structures of birds and how woodpeckers have this beak and their tongue wraps around their head like a yo-yo, and they have these different shock absorbers and things that are special to helping them not get headaches. And then all of a sudden you can then continue the conversation, potentially, never force anything, but potentially, and be like, well, let's think about like other shaped beaks, or how beaks are made for different ways of eating or things like that. But like, I think woodpecker tongues are really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah,
And
for sure.
so your passion and your excitement and enthusiasm then comes out if you're talking about that, instead of just being like blah 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 blah, this is from a textbook, like, because it is again about getting people engaged and getting them to remember birds or wildlife or the environment the next time that they go to the voting polls or they consider Giving Tuesday organizations, when they're donating money or for kids that are looking at careers or, these things have an impact. And so maybe they won't choose something that's long lasting, but if it can be in the back of their mind, I think that's where us as Scicommers and conservationists are really going to benefit and where we need to focus our efforts, because that's where people are going to start making a difference. Because we need to, again, get out of our silo of just Scicommers, just conservationists, and include everyone. So
No, yeah, that the whole engagement aspect of it, I think, is the big thing. If you can elicit that, interaction with someone, like you just got one of our former guests, Lachlan, to go run to his fridge to test out the whole butter thing. And so, I mean, if you can get that, showcase that excitement and get people to like, get off their couch or, get involved in something and, active learning like that. I mean, it's so good. And they're much more likely to remember it that way too, I think. So,
yeah. And also, I think it's about helping people realize that no matter what, they can make a difference. Because I think a lot of times people are thinking, well, what can I do? I don't have money, or I live in the city, not the country, or I'm a kid, not an adult, or whatever. But giving them these things that they can actually do is huge. And so, one of the things that I've told younger folks, just to not be ageist, but something that I could, tell your niece and nephew is, hey, just consider keeping your dog leashed, right? That's something that they can do. I know they don't have a dog, but if they did have a dog,
the
you
cats,
know,
though, they have the cats now. They both got brand
they
new kittens earlier this year, so making sure they keep
oh,
the kittens inside.
so keep the kittens inside.
Right.
Like that's a huge thing that they as kids can do, and that can be something that they become proud of. Like we're helping protect wildlife because we're keeping our cats inside. Something for adults that is most people aren't aware of is that there is such thing as bird-friendly coffee, and that you can enjoy your daily caffeine and, not change anything except the brand of coffee that you buy. And that can have a huge impact. So, one of the certifications that is out there is Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center Bird Friendly Coffee. And this certification is organic and shade grown coffee, which many people look for things like just general organic, or Rainforest Alliance is a very common one. But to actually have bird friendly coffee means that the coffee was grown in a conservation oriented manner that helps birds, but then also, of course, because everything is connected, mammals, insects, everything that live in that area. And so, all you have to do is buy bird friendly coffee, and you're doing a huge thing every day. Every time you drink coffee, that could be huge. So there are these little things that people can do, and I think it's sometimes easy to be overwhelmed with, again, what do I do? What can I do? But there are things out there that do make a huge difference.
Yeah, no, it's a good point to make. Just simple little things like that can have those huge impacts. And I mean, before we start running out of time here, because I see we're like starting to close in on the hour, I want to get to some of the other amazing things that you do. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Sci Party, of which you're a moderator of?
Yeah, so Sci Party is a weekly live Twitter conversation. So we're broadcasting here, but Sci Party exclusively takes place on Twitter using the hashtag Sci Party. And we feature a different scientist every week, again, just like you, but it's all a Twitter conversation. And so people can tune in and follow kind of a presentation of sorts by the host. The host for this upcoming week is Desiree Narango.
It was awesome, by the
Who-
way. Having met her
yeah,
in person, it's definitely a must tune in for. I'll say
yeah,
that for sure. So.
yeah. No, she's an amazing woman, and she's going to get an hour to just talk about her research doing urban ecology work on Carolina chickadees, and then she's also going to be talking about being a STEM parent. So she is a new mom.
Yeah,
Well,
because I remember last year at NAOC, she was pretty darn pregnant when you guys were giving that workshop, and I was so impressed with her doing that. But she's now with a young kid and still having to do all of that science and everything. It's got to be a tough road to hoe, and so to see
yeah,
her experiences with that, I think would definitely help a lot of people who maybe are interested in having kids later on or who are currently dealing with kids. To be able to like have some like, hey, here are some ways that you can troubleshoot all the issues that might arise while you're doing
exactly.
science and having kids. So,
Yeah, so it's just an hour. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. And the whole point is not to, it's so similar to this actually, where, it's just supposed to give exposure to that scientist, help people learn who's out there, who to follow up with questions, get, the tip of the iceberg. Um, and so if anyone would like to participate, all you have to do is reach out, and we'll get you scheduled. So,
yeah, no, I've definitely enjoyed it, and one of the nice things with it, say versus like our format here, where we have the live video, is it's very easy for someone to still be at work, or maybe if they're kind of busy, they can still tune in and
yeah,
participate along with Sci Party. They're not necessarily having to put the headphones in and listen along. They can still actively engage without maybe being so disruptive to their work. So I really
and
like that format a lot.
it's also nice too because it's hashtag based. You can always go back after the fact and find the conversation or the host and follow up with them there too. Which I know you can do that here as well, but you can have more of a transcript of the conversation. So
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's a really nice format. I'm glad you guys have been able to keep it up and have it's been cool to see it grow, over the time period that it's been running. So,
yeah, yeah.
and then like another interesting fun thing that you've been doing recently is the BioLit Club. So, can you tell us a little bit about that and how, that's been going for you?
Yes. So Violet Club is another thing where if anyone would like to participate, it's completely digital. It's a digital book club. Um, Tiana Burke, at Tingo underscore 89.
Yeah,
The
I think
underscore is
so. Yeah.
always, oh, good. You have
she's
it
she's
up.
gonna she's gonna get after us. I know she's been on watching, so I'm sure
Yes,
she's gonna get
underscore.
after us for like not having it straight up memorized completely. It's uh,
Yeah, so Tiana
yep,
and I,
yep. Tigo underscore 89. Hello. Yep.
yes.
Hi, Tiana.
So, um, so we started this book club because I went to Costco and bought a book about birds, The Genius of Birds to be specific. And she was like, I want to read that with you. And I was like, okay, cool. Tiana is in Canada, though, and I am in the Washington, D.C. area, which is very unfortunate because, of course, as with many Scicomm social media friends, you always want to be closer. And so we turned to online and just opened it up because social media is public. And so now we meet approximately once a month or every other month, and it's books that people have suggested. They're all biology related, so not just birds. Um, and then we meet on Slack, which is an app. It's a conversation app, and have a designated, again, hour where we just talk about the book. And I'm just gonna let the bus pass. um,
It's all good. It happens. I mean, that's the reason why we're doing it on this fun format. It's like it's real life. So if
yeah, yeah,
Mary or Pippin somehow work their way into that room, it happens.
yeah. um, but anyway, we actually have a Google Doc. It's a Bitly, so it's Bitly/Violet Club. If anyone wants to look at it, um, and we've had approximately 30 people every club meeting time, and it's different every time because just like any other book club, some people don't read the book, some people do, and it's gone global. So we actually have people that are tuning in from the U.S. and Canada, usually Tiana and I, and then the UK, Australia, um, all over. So it's growing, and I think it's just this kind of want again for community. I think just as time's running out, I think really the bottom line of social media is community and networking and realizing that this is a place where you can come together and you can share your science and share your experiences and get that in return from everyone, right? So you can meet people that are similar to you. You can, again, reach out to only other bird people, or you can reach out to teachers, or you can reach out to fish people. No, I love fish people.
Oh my gosh, that is, you're gonna start the whole bird versus fish thing all over again. So
I know. Um,
if
but
Katie O'Reilly is watching this, we're in trouble. So
well, I did that just for her. Um, but you can reach out, you can meet anyone. And I think that's where this is your community, and this is where you have the diversity of everyone coming together and finding that shared thing. So,
no, yeah, I definitely agree. So, just to throw this back up real quick for everyone. So, the next BioLit Club meeting is going to be Thursday, October 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then also Friday, October 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So, start reading your book now so that way you can be a very active participant in the
yeah.
discussion that's happening.
Yes,
So,
and we're having this is the first time that we're having two meetings because we're trying to accommodate time zones. Time zones are quickly becoming the bane of my existence when it comes to Scicomm, just because,
yes, I totally understand where you're at there for this. So.
well, well, someone is always up. Not everyone is always up on
Mhm.
Twitter. So we're trying to accommodate the people that would probably be asleep for the 8 p.m. Eastern meeting.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I've talked to some scientists who are just outside the range of what this time zone for where when we broadcast for Scicomm Monday, and they're like, "Yeah, can you do a second broadcast?" And I was like, "So we might do a Scicomm Monday, after dark kind of like thing, so we
Yeah,
can hit all the people that are on the far western side of Australia, or maybe the folks say in South Africa, or maybe even Asia too, where they're all going to be sleeping while we're broadcasting. So
yeah.
sometimes just a little bit, a switch of, a few hours here and there can really help include a whole bunch of other folks, which we don't want to exclude everyone because that's the whole fun part of it is being able to get everyone involved with things. So,
Exactly.
well, you have like any like last minute, tips for anyone for a SciComm, like, a little like, this is the one thing you really should do that's gonna like help send your
Oh
SciComm
God.
go. Yeah, I know. Sum
I
it all into like
I'm
one. You get
I'm
three
like,
words. No, I'm kidding.
yeah, I know. I'm like, because so much is trial and error.
Hmm.
So much. One thing that works for some person might not work for another. The number of tweets that I have analyzed and thought about all day, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a great tweet, and then it totally flops. Where I could be, waiting in line at the grocery store and be like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm just gonna like do boom, and like it goes crazy, like over the top with likes is pretty astounding to me because I can't figure it out. I
Yeah.
am supposed to be doing Scicomm for various organizations, and I'm just like, okay, great. Like, I do know that it's more complicated than that, and I'm not trying to make it seem oversimplified,
But
but
hey, as Andrew just pointed out, you did get it into the three words. You did say trial and error, which really is. It's so perfect. So
yes, a good thing.
see, that's a SciComm
But
Pro is when you can do it without even thinking about it and still like
yeah,
make it work.
oh darn, but I didn't do the hashtag. But yeah, because I think the thing is, it really is you have to um think about it that you get what you give. And so for some of us who are on social media all the time, we have these really close-knit friends and communities and things like that. And if you just want to be peripheral, that's totally fine. I mean, the thing that I keep talking to actual scientists who might be a little bit resistant is you only have to tweet once every 6 months to have a quote active account. And I'm pretty sure that most people, I won't say everyone, but most people are going to go to a conference or a wedding or some event that has a hashtag, and you can just put one sentence out there once every 6 months,
Or
and
just a
that's fine.
picture of like a bird that you
Yeah,
saw or an
no,
animal or something, the leaf that looked really cool in the grass. Just put it
yeah,
up and
no,
there you go.
absolutely. And the thing is, I think even if you do that, you're showing you're engaged, you're showing your support for the people that are doing this, and that's huge. Um, you know, Again, I'm not trying to say everyone needs to tweet every second of their life. Um, but if you want to dabble or if you want to be peripheral, if you want to pick it up only for conferences and not use it in between, that's fine. You got to find what works for you. But there are tons of people that are willing to help you, for you to ask questions, for you to put things out there, whether it's social media or just science related or whatever. Um, and so, yes, trial and error. That is what I will stick with for my 3 words.
No, no, I like it because I definitely know my Scicomm experience has been a lot of trial and error and will continue to be so in the future. I mean, this whole Scicomm Monday thing right here is a perfect example of trial and error. Every time it feels like it's, something will go wrong. And so we're just like, well, we'll try this other thing here too. So,
Yeah. And I mean, things are constantly evolving so much that, there could be something new. I mean, I know we're supposed to be wrapping up here, but for Twitter, with the 280 character potential change, like that could totally re redefine Twitter.
yeah, I'm gonna feel like I'm writing a novel now. If that, goes through, I just like I won't know what to do with myself.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll admit I'm not a fan. Um, so it's keeping it fresh. We have
mhm.
to stay current. We have to stay up on it. But if you're just on the peripheral and you don't need to be invested in things like that, and that's okay. So
Yeah, I agree. Like find what works for you and just keep, experimenting and, just go with it and see, where it takes you. And it might be something that, like you said, like you might just use for a little bit during a conference or you might, all of a sudden go gangbusters with it and then maybe your life changes and you've got, new people in your life, like a new kid or something else, and you have to back off a little bit and it totally works. And then you just are kind of just maybe reading things but not actively, retweeting or tweeting all the time. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, well, great. I really appreciate having you on. This is
Oh,
definitely a
thank you.
conversation that we could continue for hours on end easily
Yeah,
with us because I feel like we just like when it comes to when I'm talking to you and some of the other SciComm folks out there, it definitely kind of feels like sometimes we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to discuss, and even for us, we're still figuring out as we go. So.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, if to definitely just say thank you for being on, Jordan. Really appreciate it. And if you
Thank
want
you for
to,
having me.
yes, it was great having you. And then if you want to get a hold of Jordan, so if you didn't get a question in or comment in, and you wanted to just reach out to her and talk to her, feel free to tweet her at her handle, which is at Rutter. And then if you want to reach out to me if you got questions for me. You could either reach me at the handle of Scicomm Monday for the broadcast or at my personal handle of Wildlife BioGal. And next week we're going to have Brian Ing. He is a sci artist out there, so he does a lot of amazing drawings and other things for museums, and it'll be a really interesting take on how art can actually really help people learn science, and so that'll be really exciting to talk to him about that. And then I just want to give some quick shout out thank yous for all the Patreon sponsors that we have. We really appreciate you helping the broadcast happen. And then a special shout out for one of our major patrons, Jason Leathers. He goes by at I4MSU on Twitter. And so a big, big thank you to him. And if you really liked watching the broadcast and want to help out, please go visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/Scicomm Monday and see how you could help this broadcast happen. Because the goal for this is to make this completely crowdsourced, so that way there's absolutely no cost to any scientists when we go out and do any remote broadcast and things like that. So that way we can completely fund that and get all this amazing science to you, the viewers, so that way you can see it and there's no cost to any scientist out there. And then the last things with that, I just want to also say, if you're a scientist or SciCommer, contact us. We'd love to have you on. It's if you are just starting to dabble in science communication and you have 5 followers, or if you're someone out there that has 15,000 followers. We want to talk to everyone. And it doesn't matter if you're, an undergrad doing research or if you're that, 30-year career scientist that's been out there. We want to talk to all of you and get to share your science with all of our viewers. So if you're interested in coming on and talking to us, feel free to contact us via the Twitter handles that we posted earlier. And then with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. I hope you really enjoyed Scicomm Monday, and please go out, explore, do some science, have some fun, and we'll see you on the next Scicomm Monday.